Alright, so I've got it bolted up. I'll torque it after I get everything on, but it's pretty tight. So I put the rag joint on from Borgeson, and I have the nut that secures it at the 6 o'clock position. And I've got it turned right now all the way clockwise. So if you turn it counterclockwise, it goes, that's 1, 2, 3 turns and a half, and just a little bit past 3.5 turns. Now that's lock to lock on the entire gearbox. So what I'll do, I'll turn it all the way back clockwise, and I'll go about half of that, which is going to be 1 3/4 turns. That should get me pretty close to centered on the gearbox. And like I said, I can adjust this once I get everything put in and I get the car to the alignment shop. I can let them know that it's a complete rebuild, so they might have to adjust the pitman arm. But I want to get it pretty close. So like I said, we'll come all the way back clockwise until it's in that bottom 3 o'clock, or excuse me, that bottom 6 o'clock position. So here we are at 6 o'clock, and I'll go 1 3/4. So there's 1, and there is the bolt now at about the 9 o'clock position. So this should be right about halfway. So this should be center line. All right, so now that we have our steering box put in, the next thing we need to do is start putting the linkage on. So you want to make sure, like I said, you want to make sure once you start doing this that your spindle is pointing as forward as possible. Your tie rod end goes from the bottom up, and then put your castle nut on top. Your Zerk fitting goes in from the bottom. This is a 7mm Zerk fitting. So it's one of the few things on the car that's not going to be an SAE measurement. According to the Haynes manual, this is supposed to be 30 to 40 foot-pounds of torque for your connecting rod or your tie rod end to the spindle. Your castle nut is an 11/16. You have our torque wrench, and I'll go right in the middle of that. I'll set that at 35 foot-pounds of torque. So now what you want to do, now that you've got it, the torque setting, you want to make sure that you can line up your castle nut with the hole for your cotter pin. Put your cotter pin in. Now there's 2 ways to put your cotter pin in. You can put it in vertically. I usually put mine in horizontal, so I can bend both sides of the cotter pin around. And there we have our outer tie rod in. We'll grease this once everything's finished. We have our adjuster sleeve. As with anything else, you want to make sure that you don't cross thread this adjuster sleeve. And this is a setting that you're going to have to just kind of figure out on your own once you get everything together. So I'm going to put it in at about halfway. And Ford recommends that once you put these on, you have these lock nuts, you have these lock clamps pointing towards the front of the car. That's what I've looked at, and I've seen that in Ford. In one of the Osborne manuals, that this goes forward. So the next thing to put on is your inner tie rod. And again, you want to make sure that you have your clamp on there. I'm going to put both of these the same where the nut is facing down. Turn that the right direction to make it actually thread in. Again, what I'm going to do is go about halfway up my threads. Oh, wrong way again. Righty loosey, lefty tighty, or something like that. So I'll take the inner tie rod in, again about halfway into the adjuster or into the threads, just to give me plenty of room to move that around. And then these will be tightened up later. And then we'll go The other side on the passenger side is going to be exactly the same as this. So I'll put that on, and then I'll come back and we'll put the center link in. All right, here we are inside the car now. Got our idler arm on, Borgeson power steering box installed. Our idler arm is pretty well parallel to the frame mount. With the roller idler arm from Open Tracker Racing, we have these two small felt washers. One's going to go on the top, one's going to go on the bottom, and then we have a steel washer that's also going to go on the bottom. Drop our center link in from the top, put our washer on the bottom, and then just get our castle nuts started, just so it doesn't come on and off. Put our passenger side tie rod on. So with the Borgeson kit, we have this this seal that's going to go on, and I know that my steering box is pretty well centered, and if you can see inside of here, it's got 4 little keyways on it that are aligned with the keyways on the shaft itself, and that's pretty close. Lock washer on. Let's see if this crescent wrench will be big enough for this nut. All right, we're okay. Then there's our pitman arm and our final tie rod. There's our movement. Before I tighten any of these down, I want to make sure that I can go lock to lock without binding on anything. Right now everything is a little bit loose. Alright, so there I am at one end. I'm actually hitting, it sounds like I'm hitting on the passenger side, because I can see this tie rod start to buckle a little bit. And now I'm hitting again. So what I'll do, just the same way as I did before, I'll take this off just a little bit. I'm at the 6 o'clock position again with my nut that's on my rag joint. So I'll take this all the way lock to lock. That's 1. That's 2. And there's where I'm hitting. So I'm just a little bit past 2 1/4 turns. Go back, and I'm going to double check this just to make sure. All right, so there I'm hitting, and I'm going, if I'm looking at the power steering pump or the steering, at the steering, I'm going clockwise there. So I'll take it off. So there I'm hitting. So I took it off just a little bit, and right now my nut that's over here, my nut that's right here on my rag joint, is at about the 9 o'clock position if I'm looking this way at the rag joint. So there's 1 turn, 2 turns, 2 1/2 turns. So now my lock to lock is 2 1/2 turns. So what I want to do is go back to that 9 o'clock position, cut that in half, so I'll go 1 1/4 turns. All right, so there we are at 9 o'clock. 1 1/4 turns. So there's 1 1/4 turn will put me at the 6 o'clock position, which is about there. And it looks like my my idler arm is pretty close to parallel with the frame. So I'll tighten this down, and then what I'll do, I'll go outside the car and I'll adjust my tie rod ends until my wheels are back to being pointing forward. So let's tighten this down. And this is these bolts are 9/16 on the inside and the outside. So I got my idler arm tight. I'm going to go ahead and torque these down. I'm going to tighten them to 30 foot-pounds and then see where I'm at with my castle nut. That's what I did on the passenger side. It worked a little bit easier. All right, so that's at 30. I'm right in the middle, so I'm going to tighten it up. just a touch more. Bend out the cotter pin. Tighten this one up. All right, that one dropped right in the way it should. Bend my cotter pin out. All right, so the torque spec for the pitman arm to the center link is between 35 and 47. We'll set our torque wrench to 35. So the pitman arm nut is a 3/4 inch socket. All right, now that we have this torque down, our cotter pins are already pretty well aligned. Slide your cotter pin through, bend it around. I don't have a socket big enough for this yet, so I'll hope to go get that. But I do want to make sure that it's pretty snug. It's getting pretty tight, so I'm going to leave it where it's at. I'm probably actually going to drop it back off to make sure that I'm not binding up and cross-threading that in. So the last one I have is my idler arm, and that is a 7/8 socket. Set that to about 65 to start with. And luckily enough for me, at 65, I should be able to get my cotter pin through. All right, so our cotter pin's installed. I'm going to go ahead and take this nut back off because I don't like the way it's going on. All right, so to get the cotter pins out, all you need to do is just bend them back straight and pull them out. Now, when you're taking these out, you don't want to use a torque wrench to take stuff apart. You always want to use just a regular ratchet. And you see it's got a little bit of a kink in it now. That's okay, we can put it in a pair of pliers. And you should be able to reuse that at least once. So it doesn't look like there's any damage to the splines of either one of them. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put some grease on here. Should have done this in the beginning, just to lubricate this. And I'm going to put it on without the lock nut, and then tighten it back up. All right, so I did end up having the correct socket for that bottom nut on the one that's right there. The bottom nut on the steering box. It is a 1 1/4. I tightened it as much as I could with the breaker bar. I don't think it's completely tight. There's a little bit of, it's still a little bit loose where that seal is that runs between the pitman arm and the box itself. But I'm okay with it right now. Like I said, once I go in and take it to the alignment shop, I'll let them know that I don't think that's completely tight. I'll probably have to put an impact wrench on that to tighten it all the way down. Like I said, the torque spec for that is I believe 150 to 200 foot-pounds. The breaker bar that I have doesn't go that high. So I'll get that done later. Right now, as you see, the idler arm is straight. It's pretty parallel with the frame of the car. Everything else has been torqued down, with the exception of the two bolts that are right here. I've got to look up that torque spec and get those two torqued, but all the castle nuts are torqued down. All the cotter pins are in. I have to torque down the box itself from the outside, so I'll look that up and tighten those down last. So the next thing we need to do is look at the wheels themselves and adjust the adjustment sleeves and get the wheels or the hubs pointing towards the front of the car. So next I'm going to tighten up the bolts for the steering box itself. The torque spec for this, according to the Osborne manual, is 50 to 65, and these are 5/8 bolts. So I've got it set to about 68 foot-pounds, or excuse me, 58 foot-pounds. Now what you need to make sure of, I know on the inside that I have my idler arm parallel to the frame, and then to adjust the wheel to the frame, or the wheel straight, all you have to do is turn your adjustment in and out, and that'll move your individual hub in or out. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball this for now. Like I said, I'm not too super concerned that it's not 100% accurate, because I am going to get this aligned once I get the car finished. But I want to make sure that it's pretty close. Once it's done, you'll just tighten up these clamps, and that'll tighten down your adjuster. And I believe that is a 1/2 inch wrench. Yes, it is. The torque spec for these is only 10 to 14. The torque wrench that I have doesn't go that low, so I'm just going to snug it down. All right, and there we go. And you do the same thing for the passenger side, and you're pretty well done. So that's the bulk of the installation for the steering kit itself. The steering linkage, the power steering, the Borgeson power steering box is all installed. The next thing I'll have to do after I get the engine installed is to install the Saginaw power steering pump. Like I said, I got the 6-cylinder kit. The hoses are a little bit longer than what they are with the V8 kit, so hopefully that gives me a little more flexibility in how I run the hoses. Gives me a little more flexibility in keeping them away from the headers. So I do intend on installing a cooling reservoir, or basically just like a radiator, a cooling kit for the power steering, just to keep everything cool. Bought it, not sure exactly how I'm going to mount that yet, if I'm going to mount it to the main radiator, or if I'm going to mount it separate. That's one of the reasons I got the 6-cylinder kit, because the hoses are a little bit longer. So that's going to come up in a future video once I get the motor put in, so that's going to be a while before I put that on. But I will put this online. I will post this to the channel, so you can see that the bulk of how to put it in. The power steering pump itself is, if you get the V8 kit or the 6-cylinder kit, it's pretty user-friendly from what I understand. So I'm sure there's videos out there on how to do the pump hosing and all that stuff. So that's going to be covered later, but for now I'm done with this. The last thing I have to do is torque down the idler arm. The torque specs for that are 28 to 30 foot-pounds from what I found in the Haynes manual. So I'll torque that down. I'll adjust the passenger side spindle just like I did the driver's side spindle by adjusting that adjusting sleeve to get that hub, to get that spindle pointing forward towards the car. But like I said, all of this is going to be readjusted once I get the car running, once I get the car moving under its own power. It's all going to be adjusted anyway once I get it taken to the alignment shop. So this is all just a very, very rough alignment. I just want to make sure that it's pretty straight, so that when I go down the road, driving it over there, or even just maybe putting it on a trailer to tow it over, first drives around the neighborhood, it doesn't completely drive me into the curb. That'd be horrible. So this is rough. Like I said, this is a good way to, hopefully a good benchmark for you to start with on installing your Borgeson power steering kit. This is just one of the couple of options. Like I said, I chose this kit for the price and for the reviews that I've seen. It is a quicker ratio kit than what you get with any of the other kits other than like the Shelby style, but I don't think the Shelby style kits are available for 67 and up. They're only available for 64 to 66. So you don't get that 14:1 ratio like you do with the Borgeson kit. So hopefully this makes the car handle and steer similar to what the modern cars do, and hopefully it's a great improvement. I don't really have a benchmark on this car for driving it. I had a 67 and a 66 when I was younger, but that memory's pretty old, so it's not going to be hard. It'll be pretty hard to kind of reference it. But I do have other people that have classic cars, so it'll be easy to kind of see where it's at. So like I said, this is where I'm at with the car. If you want to see specific videos on what you need to do to a classic Mustang, put them in there. I'll do what I can to make a video that has what you want to see in it, if I can. But I want to support the community. I've used other people's videos to help me with my build so far, and I just want to return that favor. So like the channel, subscribe to the channel. follow the videos. Helps me as a creator, helps me, move forward with my build. So other than that, have a great Mustang day. Have a great holiday. We're coming up on Christmas. So peace to everybody. Love one another. Be kind. Appreciate what you have. Appreciate and work for what you don't have. All right. Love y'all. Have a nice day.
Project 68.